Make sure that that's running. If you're lucky, you might just be done right there. You might get your whole copy and you might be finished. Otherwise, you might not hear a motor spin up, or you might not hear other things happening. And sometimes there's no way to test that motor easily without having that exact board either, because you don't want to go playing around too much with voltages and things like that unless you want to spend some time sending it to a data recovery house. So a head crash. Sometimes the head doesn't fall off like that. Sometimes it just hangs there and drags along the platter and does more damage. But it's typically that's what we're looking at when we look at a head crash. So I actually replaced this one and got this drive back up and running. You can see the reflection here is basically hanging, and nice close-up of that. But I replaced the head of that one and was able to recover the data off that drive, and it worked just fine. The hardest part about this one was that the head actually parked on the inside of the platter instead of the outside of the platter, and I'll go into that in a few minutes. So you're seeing damaged heads. Now, you can't go to Jensen and ask, hey, give me your head replacement kit. You're not going to get a head replacement kit. They don't know what you're talking about. There are no tools specifically made for doing this. There's probably only a handful of people who even try to do these kind of things. But you're going to end up trying to make your own tools, and this is paper. This is a yellow Post-it note, and you're going to fold it, and I'll show you how it holds them apart. But the whole point here is, I'm lucky enough on this particular drive to have a ramp. And that's pretty much on all the Hitachi/IBM drives, there's going to be a ramp. Some of the Seagates and some of the Western Digitals have a ramp on the outside. That's really nice because this ramp basically holds the two heads apart, and you can keep the two heads lined up. And so your piece of paper here, your whole point for that piece of paper is to hold these two pieces away from each other, about the same configuration that they're in the ramp, so that when you get it out, that they don't touch each other. Once they touch each other and the two ends hit each other, it's a done deal. It's a lot easier if you've already taken out your good drive, your old drive stuff first before you switch over from the new drive, so you have some place to put it, because you can't really sit these things down or anything. It'll take you about 2 hours to do a head replacement like this, and you just have to be patient. But if you're careful, it'll work very well for you, and you'll actually be able to read that data again. So you take out of your old one. The only thing that's there is on this bottom piece right here before you take the head off. This piece has usually got a screw in it that goes through to the other side for the contacts for the IDE board. Once you remove that piece, it's fairly easy to take it out, but you got to do a little bit of wiggling and jiggling just to get it right so that it comes out of the side and doesn't do any other damage while it's doing it. And then once you line them up, and this is what it'll look like when you're actually moving it. You'll take paper and fold it. You'll keep them their distance apart. And this here typically is not actually the head. The head is right here on the end, right on the very end. They did the same kind of thing that IBM did like in the 50s. They basically put a slider mechanism on here to hold the head, because the head is so small that there's nothing to mount it to. And so they've got to do something basically to give it some pizzazz there. So it mounts on the end of that. And you'll also see, too, from the way that this piece of metal moves, you can see that the whole idea of the hard drive was made so that when the pressure from the air was spinning up and the drives and platters were spinning up, the pressure is what's pushing up on that. So you can see how flexible these things were. And they're actually made as a triangle on purpose because it gives it the most rigidity at the end and takes off all the extra metal, and then they cut all the holes in it. And that's the same thing for the holes down here on the arm, where the airflow actually helps, kind of like the wing of an airplane, push those apart in a certain pattern so that you can actually make that head float. This is what it looks like. Bad news. If your piece of paper falls out, and that's another good thing too, is that when you're doing this, you need to be in a spot where somebody's not bumping your arm. So you need to make sure that there's nobody standing behind you or any of that kind of stuff, and just kind of lock the door or whatever, and make sure that that does not hit each other at all, because if your arm gets bumped and that little piece of paper falls out, it's game over. You're not gonna be able to do it with this. Just stop right there, close it back up, and go back to eBay. And go get another drive. Start all over again. Now you're ramping up your cost though, but most of the time you can buy these older drives or anything that's like $250 and below, easily $69, $70. So most of the time you're going to save still a lot of money. This is what that ramp looks like. Now this one happened to be an IBM, and it's got these little fingers on it that actually help line it up on the ramp. These are great, because if you've got one of these, and so you open up your drive and you see that, it's like, woo, I got a party going on, because this is going to help you a lot, get that thing lined back up. If you don't have a ramp on it, then it's going to be hard to try to in the exact spot so that when the head comes back out onto the platter, it doesn't drag the bottom of the head along the platter and just scrape it right back off. Because once that happens, the rest of the thing is going to dig into it like an airplane. It's just going to crash right into that platter and scratch the crap out of it, and so your good data is no longer good. It's actually going to be gone. This, I think, is completely plausible and possible, and I've done it. This is 4 heads on 2 platters, and it's great that there's a ramp there. You don't usually when you got 4, but I got lucky in this particular one. So be very, very cautious and take your time to line those back up on that ramp, because if you mess that up, and the second that you power it back up, it's going to be over. And make sure you reassemble back all of this stuff over here, because the locking mechanisms and things like that, if you don't do it right and you don't get them back on right, or you just say, oh, that's a locking, just throw it away, what'll happen is when the heads come back out, they'll fly right off, and they just keep right on going. It's gone. So, and once that happens, it'll never come back, because it'll try to draw it back in, and it'll just scratch the heads right off the platter and blah, blah. So this one is a little bit harder, but this one is completely possible and plausible. The problem here is that these mount on the inside. So tweezers are extremely good for this, especially like surgical tweezers. So there's tweezers that push out, and there's tweezers that push in. So you want to get some that push out. And so you basically are going to do like a game of operation. You're going to be very cautious. You're going to turn it on its side. You're going to go down the side here, and you're going to put the tweezers around it and push them apart. And then this one's going to take 2 people to do it right, because you've got to move this set of heads back onto a live, good platter without touching it and park them back in the same spot. It can be done a little bit longer, 2.5 hours or so. It takes a little bit of practice. But again, we're only talking about that last 5%, last 4% of the drives that you can do that. If you see this, then you start praying, because it's never going to happen. You're not going to do it. It's not going to be able to be recovered. This is a SCSI drive with 16 heads, 9 platters. It's bad. It's gone. You'll never even get this mechanism out of here without scratching the platters in the first place, but I think it can't be done, not this way. So let's look at some of the platter damage and when you know you can just pretty much quit. This is what happens, and the head will keep on moving, going, and the drive will keep trying to read the data, and it'll keep moving along, and it'll just scratch that platter. This is what it looks like. This one is an IBM hard drive. This one's a ceramic glass platter, and if you guys look at the picture on the myharddrive.com, you'll see that you can see through the platter. It really is glass, and so it scratched it. This one's kind of unique. It scratched both heads on both sides, scratched all the way across the platter, and so it dug off all the oxide, and you can see right through it. And it's pretty cool to look at while it's and stuff, but that's... And this guy got really mad. This guy, I called him back and I said, there's no way that you're going to ever get this data back. And he goes, I don't believe you. I want you to box it up, and I'm going to take it to somebody else. And so when he got there, I had taken all the little pixie dust and I put it in a little bag. And I said, you're right. All you got to do is sprinkle this once in a while and you'll see your data again. He did not have that reaction. Everybody else in the office did, but it's $50. I do a $50 valuation. Here's the other key from that question, is that every data recovery house, and they don't want you to know this because you can hold them hostage, they do all the work before they tell you they can recover it. Like OnTrack says, well, we examined your drive and we'll send you a list, and this is what we can recover. It's not what they can recover. They did recover it. They're not going to even send you the list until they've already got all the data back and they already have it secure someplace. Because they only have one chance. If that drive dies in that process and they sent you this list, well, now they got liability. Oh, you had my data, but now you can't get it? What do you mean? So things like that happen. They already do it, and it's already done, and it's already sitting on a drive waiting for you to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to pay you. They just won't tell you that. But I do a $50 valuation fee, and because I'm already dealing with corporate clients and things like that, it's not really a problem. I just tell them yes, no, good, bad, whatever, and I get 98% of everything back. So it works for me. This is a drive where the head hit the platter, and I kind of just turned it sideways so you can see the light. This is that checkerboard pattern. It was basically skipping. It was, and you're not going to get that back either. That one's pretty much done. And this is a good example of somebody who tried to do their own before they actually gave it to me and continued on. This is the other thing. It actually started out making these little tiny S's. Again, it kind of started skipping, but a little piece of the metal dinged it. And so as the head's moving along, it's whacking the platter until it eventually does complete scrape like this, but you'll get these little S's. So if you see the little S's, you're done there too. Motor failure. You'll be lucky if it moves at all like this when you have motor failure. This is the reason why you can't do one with the motor failure. When you take them off, the only thing that's in between these two platters, if you have two, if you have one, you can do it. You can move, you can buy another drive exactly like it, you can take that platter out and you can move it to another platter and you're in good shape. But if you got two, they spin as soon as you do this, and this little piece right here is nothing. There's no grid, there's no nothing, it's all held by pressure, and so you can see you just can't, and you can't remove that motor. That motor's part of the casing. This is actually just a cap for the motor. And so once you do that, the spindle won't be able to be removed and replaced. So again, this is one of those reasons why you can't do a multi-platter. When you have a multi-platter and you try to move two platters at once, because that servo information is actually what's making up that cylinder, you'll never line it back up again and you'll never get moved over to another drive after you've done it. So once you remove those screws off the top of the platter, you're done too. So, and then it's all in the garbage, all of it. So good, the bad, the whole thing, just write your data on. Yes, sir. Yeah, and there actually is like a small little area that's already set up around it, and you can do that, but it's difficult to get multiple ones. I mean, there's no device that does it that I know of, and so you've got to do it, again, and it's kind of the lowest common denominator. A lot of us are like, there's an extreme amount of work once you get to this level, and there's no device that I know of that does that. I've been working on some things, but I haven't gotten anything that works quite right, like taking surgical clamps and like in 2 and 3 levels of them, but you can't get them just right. And if it moves even a micron, it's over. Yes, sir? Can you use an external motor? Well, I've tried a couple of things. If it's not spinning at exactly the right speed, it will cause a problem. It wants to spin. It knows exactly how it needs to spin. And this is another good example of when your motor might be bad, but it does actually spin. That little teetering component that sits on the outside of the drive where it unlocks the arm, if your platters do not spin at the right speed, it's not enough pressure to move that clamp out of the way, and that's a good indication your drive's spinning slower than it's supposed to. It's still a damaged motor, but it's extremely difficult to try to use another motor unless you're going to like drill through the middle of the motor. I mean, you've got all kinds of issues there, and you can't turn one over and run it the other way like back to back because they spin in the opposite direction. So, yes, sir? I've watched Smart many, many times to try to figure out. Here's another thing about Smart is that Smart like clears itself like every 3 months. So like whatever data it writes and says, oh yeah, I had a bad block like 6 months ago, blah, 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 it's already cleared and now Smart starts all over again. So it's not really giving you good data back. So the data is always on the fly. It's always stored at the time that it's running, and you don't usually get good responses back. So I'm not really sure of a good way to do. Yes, sir?
If hardware's going bad, you find there's one piece that's gone bad. For example, if you swap out the controller.
Most of the time. Yeah, I know what you're getting to, but the only chance that that's usually not true is that some extreme cases of lightning have caused the head hit splatters, and there's one of the other things too is like once you know that you're going to have to buy new parts on eBay, it might be a really good idea just to open up the casing of the drive, just to take a quick look to see if you actually have physical platter damage or if the pillow itself that's on the outside of the filter has silver oxide on it.